Hey, it's Nicholas with the Backyard TARDIS, here with another Backyard TARDIS Random Thoughts podcast. This is just a podcast of me kind of rambling on at different things that I've been thinking about. Some of these are kind of overdue. I thought I was going to make these more bite-sized, but I'm going to kind of throw them all together. So I'm going to talk about RTX convention, the Comic-Con convention, the Star Trek convention, and then also I'm going to throw in a little bit about the Scarif podcast's recent quick cuts. I miss being able to submit some stuff for that, and there were some things that are just up my alley. So first off, RTX, that's the Rooster Teeth convention. And those that don't know, I really like a lot of the Rooster Teeth animation properties, so I'll go through a few of them here. First off, there was Ruby. They showed a snippet of Season 9. It was nothing amazing. It was kind of where you expected it to go, but that was neat. But the Ruby Arafel trailer, so that's a game that will be coming to, I believe, multiple platforms, but noticeably for me was Nintendo Switch. But it's being made by WayForward, and that is an indie developer who is actually, I don't know if you can still call them indie. They've become so mainstream now. They've got so many hits under their belt. But they're definitely a developer that I really love, a property that I love, and the game just, 2D side-scrolling action. It looked great, so really excited about that. Then they went on the RVB Red vs. Blue Zero panel. Now, Red vs. Blue Zero had some problems. Personally, I enjoyed it. Part of that was because I had an appreciation for a lot of the people who were behind it. They let the Screw Attack crew, basically the Death Battle guys, take over production of it. And specifically, Torian took over the animation, and then all of a sudden his name is escaping me, but another writer from the Death Battle crew kind of took over the direction of the show. And so Torian really, I feel like he, the original guy who kind of created Ruby and did that, all of a sudden his name's escaping me and I feel really bad, but he passed away, and everyone, has said, well, the animation has never been up to snuff. Well, Torian is the spiritual successor to him, in my opinion, as far as like the animation, the fights, the stuff. The problem is Red vs. Blue started out as just kind of, a bunch of idiots comedy in Halo armor, goofing around in a canyon. Then it got an epic story that still involved those idiots. And so you could have the comedy there because you knew the backstory, who these people were and why they were funny and stupid, and then put them in these like really action-packed scenes, and it worked. I feel with Red vs. Blue Zero, they introduced new people who were kind of like the freelancers. They were, these top-notch agents, but then they tried to add some characters that were the comedy portion into this squad. And there's no backstory. There's no built up. You can't have a Tucker or a Griff type personality in a team of elite soldiers when there's no setup for that. And so I feel like that's why it fell flat for so many people, is they showed a lot of really good action. They had some jokes that were funny, but the jokes had no weight behind them. They didn't have years and seasons of history behind them like previous jokes. So that's why they just felt out of place in amongst lots of action. And the lots of action didn't feel like it had the heart in the story because it was more about the action. And there was kind of a deep story, but it almost came off comical and ridiculous in how deep it was. Well, they're coming up with, they've always had mini-series or outtakes or PSAs or funny little things that are kind of low budget they do in between the seasons. They're bringing that back. Red versus Blue Zero wheels up. But here's the thing. They're going to do family sitcom. They said inspired by TGIF. and with a very Full House type intro song that's going to introduce it, and it's going to be funny family antics of this elite squad goofing off doing that. And I really think that this might help fix that. It might build these characters up into characters so that we care about their jokes, their inside things. We see them as funny and that they can be goofy. And so when we see them, in battles and then they say a silly joke, it doesn't feel out of place. Kind of like the original Red versus Blue did. And so I'm hoping that this will greatly improve it overall. Next up, the Death Battle panel. And I'm a huge Death Battle fan. Love that. Most of these, because I am very late, RTX happened like a month ago. I'm very late to making this video. Most of these have already come out. But so let's start with the one that hasn't. Death Battle right now, it's on its mid-season break. When it comes back, it's coming back with Batman versus Iron Man. Now, out of all the Batman matchups, this is the one I wanted. See, they first had Batman versus Spider-Man, which I never really thought of as a comparison. Then they had Batman versus Captain America. And then they followed that up with Batman versus Black Panther, which I didn't realize how comparable those characters were until after that. But the giant truck goes by. But after that, I really got to think. I've always wanted Batman versus Iron Man, and after they did Batman versus Black Panther, they're like, okay, we did the trilogy. Batman's not really coming back because we've done all the main matchups to Batman. I'm like, what? They didn't do like what I thought was the most obvious comparison. The two billionaires with super teched out suits. So that's happening, and it looks like it's going to be good. Now, for DBX, they announced some things. Star Wars fans, Palpatine versus Xehanort from the Kingdom Hearts games. So the battle of the evil, ugly guys. This was really fun. It was really good. I enjoyed watching that one. They announced Goomba versus Koopa 2. So that was an early death battle. One of the first death battles to be a draw. One of the very few death battles to be a draw. And so they thought, well, we're going to bring it back for DBX so that there is a clear winner. And it was definitely fun. This is a goofy one. This is one of the ones that put Death Battle on the map. And so having them go back and do that was really good. And they announced Jocelyn was coming back. So Jocelyn the Intern was a character that they had joked about. They'd made up. They'd had a mannequin that they said, but it was this intern that they weren't, keeping in a closet, doing the research for him. And then they got one of the, should have prepared better with names on this, but they got one of the actresses from all that, kid actress, she's adult now, but, comes in, she does the voice of it. They start doing Desks of Death Battle. So, like, the research that doesn't pertain to the fight, but it's just goofy stuff they find out in the comic. Like, when Batman went to the past and had to be a cowboy, or when all sorts of just weird, odd things, like when Godzilla played in a basketball game. Just weird stuff like that. It was a great little series, but unfortunately, YouTube's algorithm didn't make it profitable. And because they're paying a voice actress to do it, that it just didn't work. So they brought her character back as a co-host for Ringmaster in their DBX. So the DBX is their battles that are no rules. It's based on fan vote. So it's just kind of a fight with a little kind of rundown about the characters in the beginning, but they're not analyzing them. That was really cool to have her come back, to find a way to bring her back into Death Battle, because she's been missed. Okay, so that was RTX Comic Con. Comic-Con, this digital Comic-Con, it was a letdown for me for the most part. So let's say the Star Trek panel, bored for the most part. I'm just not into what Star Trek is doing right now. The Lower Decks reveal trailer was interesting. I enjoyed Lower Decks. It's the only really new thing coming out of Star Trek that I'm enjoying. So I like the little trailer. Doctor Who panel. I really couldn't care, and I'm a huge Doctor Who fan, but what they did with the Timeless Child, it is zapped all interest for the show for me. They brought in, this is the first one with a new companion there, and they showed off another character who's going to be there. Other things have leaked, like they showed that the Sontarans are going to be in this next season. They didn't delve a whole lot other than that it's going to be all one long story arc for the season. It's going to be a super short season. It's like 6 or 8 episodes, something like that. I don't know. Not much interest. And shortly after Comic-Con, they announced that Chibnall and Jodie are leaving the show, and everybody seemed really shocked about that. After the first season of Chibnall's run, they announced that like their contract wasn't like they were doing what they were contracted to, and then they split that second season into 2. So what we got as season 12 was only half the length of a season, and we're only getting about a third of a length of a season for this one. So, and we got years stretched in between it. I'm not surprised. They've just been drawing it out, but it's already been pretty much announced before. It's just now officially announced. But they've already said that they're not going to continue on. And both Jodie and Chibnall have said if they're not staying, I'm not staying. So, but they released that after the Comic-Con to try to not completely take the air out of the panel. But there was a Doctor Who comic panel by Titan Comics, and you know what? Did you know about it? Because I didn't get to see it because nobody talked about it. Nobody mentioned it was going to happen, and it apparently was all about a new Missy comic run that's about to be wrapping up, and I knew nothing about that. I'm going to be all about that. I'm going to look for that now. If I hadn't heard another YouTuber talking about it, I wouldn't know about it. I wouldn't even know this comic existed. This is really bad marketing. I am, target audience. I loved Missy. I'm a huge Doctor Who fan. I read comics. I would have loved this panel. I would love this comic. Nobody's telling me about it, and it was probably advertised in a 13th Doctor comic. I'm not reading those because I'm not nothing against the 13th Doctor, but I don't like the Timeless Child, and it zapped all interest I had in that iteration of the Doctor. So that was but the highlight for me of Comic-Con was the Stargate Atlantis reunion panel. And really, any attention or love we can bring to Stargate right now, Amazon having just bought MGM and showing that, I think it was good. I thought it was a good turnout. Lots of good little tidbits. I think is it Tori Higginson, the one that played Weir? She admitted she wasn't a nerd going into it. She hadn't watched the show. She hadn't watched sci-fi. And she still doesn't. And it was funny seeing the actor who plays Rodney. He was kind of teasing her, jibing her a little about that. The same with the Robert Picardo, who plays the Doctor. They were kind of joking about her sci-fi knowledge. But they talked about how a lot of them thought maybe this would be bad for their career, and how amazing it was for their career, how much they love it, how much they'd want to come back and guest star in a fourth Stargate show. It was just a lot of laughs, a lot of stories. It was really cool to see the relationship between some of the actors who were not on the show at the same time, but because of Stargate conventions have become great friends. And they almost talk with each other as if they filmed together on the show. Really cool to see. Loved this panel. Definitely go give it a watch. Okay, Star Trek convention. So the only reason I know about anything that went on at the Star Trek convention is because the Salty Nerd podcast set up a booth there, and they live streamed it. So I mean, they didn't get the panels or anything like that, but they interviewed a lot of people, a lot of cool things. There was a company that was making Star Trek wines. That was awesome and cool. There was a number of actresses they got to interview that to me was just amazing, just seeing all the cosplay, seeing that. But one of the things that, in full disclosure, I'm not a rebel. I'm about following whatever the government says. Not blindly, but I'm very much a pro law and order type kind of person, and so if there's a regulation that says, hey, if you're indoors you gotta wear a mask, you gotta wear a mask. I'm like, okay, I wear a mask, whether I feel the mask is necessary, whether that I'm not a revolutionary, if you will. However, there comes a point when some things it's like, what's the point? So when this was all planned, Nevada had opened up, and then it started to close down again. And so they had the mask mandate. Now they have these Star Trek actors, and they're charging for pictures with them, but you have to wear a mask. They have to wear a mask. You have to have plexiglass in the middle. And to me, what's the point? You have people doing the cosplay and they're wearing the mask. It's like, what's the point? And so I guess I'm a person who's on the fence of either they need to be able to be open and do it, or it's something they shouldn't be doing. Either they should be having the convention and it should be all open in that, or why are we having a convention and not having a digital event with just like the vendors doing there, and maybe having a day for the public where they have like a cosplay showcase or something like that. But if you they're making sure everybody's vaccinated or tested and doing all that, but it just kind of felt off. It felt weird, versus these other cons that are all being kind of done as digital events, where they do have all the crew, all the stars are coming into a studio. They're all vaccinated and tested and all that, but they're coming onto a screen together doing their panels and stuff, but the audience is watching at home. That feels less weird than seeing people there and do that. And I think for anybody who paid for that picture, that's going to be weird. That's going to be weird in 10 years to look back at a picture with you and an actor in your masks and not being able to see their face. Like, it's kind of why. And if you were somebody who spent the money to come do that this year, and you can't come next year or whatever, that's weird. So the other thing was the big news that Creation lost the license. So it technically wasn't even a officially sanctioned Star Trek convention. It was a sci-fi convention that just happens to only have Star Trek stars as the guest appearances. So that was kind of interesting too. However, all in all, it looked like everybody was having a good time. It just kind of felt odd. And the whole pandemic is the reason, I had lots of reasons of why I didn't have time or didn't have money or whatever. But ultimately, the pandemic was the reason why I didn't go. Chose not to travel to another state. And during all this, I work as a locksmith. I work with the elderly. I work with lots of people in the community. I don't really need to go to a place where people from all over the states are mixing or whatever, and then bringing that back to my local community. But I fully understand why people feel okay with it, and I don't really have a problem with anybody that went. I think it was a good, people are eager. People want to go back to that, and so it's just one of those things that it just kind of felt like a weird thing because it was an in-between. So anyways, now the last subject, the Scarif podcast Quick Cuts. So they talked about the Sonic Syndrome, or the reaction of Sonic and listening to fans, and I think I have a lot to talk about this. First off, when that happened. So the director came out, he came out immediately, took all the blame, and apologized to the fans. Then a little bit later, it came out, he hated that design. So he's running the movie, he hates that design, and he basically said that initially, even what we got in the end was not what it was. Initially, it was going to look more like Space Jam. In that, or like that Sonic Progressive commercial. Google that. That was what Sonic was going to look like. Flat, kind of, just 2D, straight out of the game cutscene character in live action. Studio was like, you cannot put that out in 2019. Not after Detective Pikachu. No, these need to look like real animals, this, that. And so they started working with that, and the studio was like, Sonic looks too weird, too goofy, too cartoony. Make him alien. Make him have defined muscles and features. He can't have noodle arms. He can't, he's gotta look, make him more alien. And they were being pressured by a board of directors who has no interest in the games. They're just looking at movie trends, and they're like, no, Garfield, Alvin and Chipmunk, like all of these, like, it needs to look more animal, atomically correct. Stuff like Space Jam, Rocky and Bullwinkle, like that's stuff of the past. Who Framed Roger, like that's old. We don't do that anymore. And so they were being forced this, and an employee who really hated what he was doing leaked the photo, hoping for the backlash. So they get the backlash. And so then they release the trailer, and they get a whole lot of backlash. And that gives them the empower. Now the director goes to the board and says, look at the fans. Boom. Sonic fans have had this kind of power for years. They mobilize. Sonic fans freaked out in Sonic Boom when Sonic went from tan arms to blue arms. They oftentimes, like the classic Sonic fans, they look at a game and if Sonic has green eyes instead of black eyes, they write the game off right there. They're very picky about the look of Sonic. So such a drastic departure. Now, this is an instance, a rare instance, where fans' empowerment allowed that. Now look at something else, like the what Warner's doing over with like the Justice League properties. There was fan backlash about Batman v Superman, and then they took the Suicide Squad and they were like, no, we gotta comedy Marvel it up, and they butchered that movie. Now, the Batman v Superman, I don't like that movie. I don't like Zack Snyder's vision. However, there were fans of that. When they butchered that up to try to appeal to a bigger audience, they didn't appeal to the Marvel audience. They just made a garbage movie because they went in there and meddled. And that's what they did to the DCEU. They meddled to the point where it made nobody happy. It didn't make the Marvel fans come over and suddenly go, wow, DC's just like Marvel. And it didn't make the current DC fans that love Zack Snyder's stuff happy at all. And so they kind of just lost everybody. And sometimes that can be what happens when you listen too closely to the fans and when you don't understand what the fans are saying. You're not getting the appropriate message. Because a lot of times big studios are so removed that they're just hearing what fans shout. And it's a big thing on us fans is we need to learn how to shout better, how to actually express what we want. Because if we just act angry all the time, we're just noise. And they don't understand what we want. You know, it's like Rise of Skywalker. Everybody was upset about Rose Tico. There was a lot of stuff about Rose Tico. I don't think there was anything wrong with her as an actress. She's completely sidelined in The Rise of Skywalker as if somehow that's appeasing the fans. I think doing something actually meaningful and constructive with her character would have gone a lot more to turning people's opinion of that character around, not just, well, she wasn't popular, so let's get her off the screen. The Sonic community is really bad about that. Sega had no hand in the movie. They sold off the complete rights to the movie, kind of like Marvel did with Spider-Man and X-Men and all that kind of stuff. Sega needed money. They sold off the movie rights to Sonic. So they didn't have creative control. They weren't happy. They actually expressed on Twitter, the creator of Sonic came out and was very unhappy with how Sonic looked in the initial trailer. But Sonic fans, they had a thing where, like, after the Sonic Adventure games, they gave all the side characters, you know, trying to flesh out the 3D environment, they gave them all unique kind of gimmicky gameplay, whereas in the classic games, all of Sonic's friends kind of played like Sonic. They just had additional abilities. You know, Tails could fly, but he still ran through the loops and all that kind of stuff. Knuckles could glide and climb walls. Not in the adventure games. You know, Tails was put in a mech and he was a shooter, and Knuckles was a treasure hunter that went on fetch quests type things. People didn't like that. And they had an outcry. And Sega's message that they got and have for years is, we don't want any of the other characters playable. And Sega does this constantly. Something about Sonic gets people don't like, and they don't get why people don't like it. And they respond. They edit, they get rid of something, and then everybody's like, no, bring that back. Bring that back. I want that. And Sega's confused. They're like, no, you told us you were angry about that, so we got rid of it. And now you say you want it back. We're confused. And a lot of that is because people are saying they're unhappy about something, but they're not truly expressing why. And sometimes if a studio listens too much to that kind of stuff, it affects, it can affect the quality of a product, because sometimes the audience doesn't always know best, especially because the audience, they're not programmers, they're not writers, they're not all these things. So they might know the property forward and backward. They may not, they can identify, I don't like this, but they can't always tell you why they don't like it or what they should do differently. And that's where I think people oftentimes fail, and why it's a very tightrope thing for studios to respond and listen to fans. I think, you know, it's just one of those things that it's a case-by-case basis. I don't think Sonic the Hedgehog sets a precedent, though. I think that was them really messing with an iconic character. If they came out with a new Mickey Mouse cartoon and Mickey Mouse looked like Ratatouille, everybody would be upset. It's an iconic character and it was butchering the design. It's the same thing with Sonic. He's got a very distinct, iconic look. Messing with that, in the end, it's a kids movie. It wasn't 100% true to game world. You know, Tom the Cop is not in the games. Fans were okay with that. That was their artistic writing and all that went into that. But there are certain things that you have to hold. Once you have an established property, you have to hold a certain measure of respect for what came before. And that's something that I think we see a lot lacking in TV, especially sci-fi and superheroes, is we're starting to see a lot of lack of respect for what came before, and that's what's turning fans off. And so you can tell all the progressive stories, all the different things that you want, but if you show that respect for what came before, you're going to maintain your audience. Anyways, this is kind of the first Backyard TARDIS random thoughts, just me and my van in between jobs, shooting the breeze, whatever's on my mind. Hope everybody's having a good day. I'll catch you in the next episode.